Extreme ownership. This video is based on key insights from the book Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. Introduction. The story begins with a tense night in Ramadi, Iraq, where Leif Babin, a SEAL commander, faced a dangerous situation. It shows how quickly things can change in combat and why strong leadership is so important. Babin and his team were hunting a high-ranking terrorist when a man ran from a building. As they chased him, they found themselves surrounded by enemy fighters. This moment perfectly illustrates the chaos and unpredictability of war, and the need for quick thinking and decisive action. Jocko Willink, Babin's task unit commander, understood that leadership wasn't about being the strongest or smartest person, but about preparing a team to handle anything. He drilled into his SEALs the idea of relax. Look around. Make a call. This wasn't just a catchy phrase. It was a reminder to stay calm under pressure, assess the situation, and rely on their training. Willink emphasized 4 key principles, called the laws of combat: cover and move, simple, prioritize and execute, and decentralized command. These weren't just rules. They were a way of thinking that allowed SEALs to thrive in the most difficult circumstances. The situation Babin found himself in demanded immediate prioritization. The enemy fighters posed the biggest threat, and dealing with them took precedence over searching the captured man. Willink taught his teams that focusing on the most critical task, even when everything feels urgent, is essential. Babin acted on this principle, immediately engaging the enemy with accurate rifle fire. He didn't overthink it. He simply reacted based on his training and the immediate need to protect himself and his EOD operator. This demonstrates the execute principle. Once a decision is made, act decisively and without hesitation. Cover and move was crucial, as Babin and the EOD operator retreated with the prisoner. They didn't try to do everything at once. Instead, one provided cover while the other moved, then they switched roles. This teamwork, built on trust and practice drills, allowed them to safely fall back and rejoin their team. It's like 2 friends crossing a busy street. One looks for cars while the other walks, then they switch. Willink and Babin learned that complex plans often fall apart in combat. Keeping things simple, clear, concise orders and straightforward tactics is far more effective. Babin didn't try to issue detailed instructions to the EOD operator during the firefight. They both understood their roles and acted accordingly. This simplicity extends beyond tactics. It means clear communication, well-defined goals, and avoiding unnecessary complexity in any team effort. Decentralized command is about empowering those on the ground to make decisions. Willink didn't micromanage from headquarters. He trusted his team leaders, like Babin, to assess the situation and act accordingly. Babin, in turn, trusted his EOD operator. This trust allows for faster reactions and better decision-making, because information doesn't have to travel up and down a chain of command. It's like a basketball team where players can make quick passes and adjustments without waiting for the coach to tell them what to do. The operation didn't capture the target, but it wasn't a failure. They eliminated enemy fighters, gathered intelligence, and showed the terrorists they couldn't hide. Willink stresses that even in defeat, there are lessons to be learned. He and Babin realized the importance of thorough map study and clear guidelines for pursuing suspects. These lessons weren't just about tactics. They were about continuous improvement and a commitment to learning from mistakes. Willink and Babin brought these lessons back home and developed a leadership training program for SEALs. They found that many leadership books focused on individual traits, but true leadership is about building and leading a team. They emphasized that a leader's success is measured by the success of their team, not by personal achievements. They applied these principles to various companies, finding that the same concepts that worked in combat, clear communication, decisive action, and decentralized command, could also drive success in the business world. The authors believe that leadership isn't about being perfect, but about owning everything that happens on your watch. It's about taking responsibility for both successes and failures, and constantly striving to improve. They share their experiences not as a war story, but as a guide for anyone who wants to build a high-performing team and achieve victory, whether on the battlefield or in the boardroom. They emphasize that these laws of combat aren't just for soldiers. They're for anyone who wants to lead effectively and achieve lasting success. Chapter 1: Extreme Ownership. Jocko Willink recounts a chaotic operation in Ramadi, Iraq, to illustrate the core principles of leadership he learned as a Navy SEAL. The story begins with a thick fog, both literal from smoke and dust, and figurative, representing the confusion of war. Willink's team found themselves in a messy situation with multiple units operating in the same area, unclear communication, and a lot of gunfire. He immediately noticed an Abrams tank positioned aggressively, signaling distress with a red smoke grenade. This set the stage for a mission riddled with potential for disaster. Willink explains that SEAL leadership isn't about giving orders from a safe distance. It's about being right in the thick of things, trying to make sense of the chaos. He and his senior enlisted advisor joined an Army company commander, placing them directly in the middle of the action. The operation involved SEAL snipers, Iraqi soldiers, and other units, all trying to take control of a dangerous neighborhood. The enemy, known as Mujs, were described as ruthless and cunning fighters. As the fighting escalated, reports of casualties and enemy engagements flooded the radio, adding to the confusion. Willink details how quickly things can go wrong when plans fall apart and communication breaks down. He highlights the importance of understanding the fog of war, the uncertainty and misinformation that are constant companions in combat. The situation became critically dangerous when Willink discovered a potential friendly fire scenario unfolding. A Marine unit was heavily engaged with what they believed were enemy fighters in a building, preparing to call in airstrikes. However, Willink realized that one of his SEAL sniper teams was likely nearby, potentially in the path of the incoming fire. This is where Willink's leadership was truly tested. Instead of relying on reports or assumptions, he decided to investigate himself. He approached the Marine gunnery sergeant and, despite the intense fighting, decided to check the situation firsthand. This demonstrates a key SEAL principle: taking decisive action and not being afraid to get involved. What Willink discovered was a classic blue-on-blue, incident-friendly fire. Iraqi soldiers, acting outside their designated area, had mistakenly entered a compound occupied by Willink's SEAL snipers. A firefight erupted, and the Marines and Army troops, believing they were engaging the enemy, began pouring fire into the building. Willink's quick thinking and willingness to investigate prevented a potentially catastrophic airstrike on his own men. He immediately clarified the situation, stopping the attack and ensuring the safety of his team. This incident underscores the importance of clear communication, accurate information, and taking ownership of the situation. Willink emphasizes that the most important lesson from this experience wasn't just avoiding friendly fire, but understanding the responsibility of leadership. He could have easily blamed the Iraqi soldiers, the Marines, or even his own sniper team for the confusion. However, he recognized that as the commander, he was ultimately responsible for everything that happened under his command. He took full ownership of the incident, acknowledging the mistakes made by everyone involved, including himself. This is the core of extreme ownership, a concept Willink champions. It means accepting complete responsibility for both successes and failures, and never passing the blame to others. The author recounts the aftermath of the incident, including the arrival of investigators and the pressure to find someone to blame. However, Willink stood firm in his belief that he was responsible. He meticulously analyzed the events, identifying numerous errors in planning and execution. Despite the temptation to deflect blame, he presented a comprehensive report outlining all the mistakes, including his own. This act of humility and accountability earned him the respect of his superiors and subordinates. Willink explains that true leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about owning your mistakes and learning from them. Willink then transitions to a business example, illustrating how the principles of extreme ownership apply outside of the military. He describes a situation where a vice president of manufacturing was failing to implement a new plan, blaming his team and external factors for the lack of progress. Willink explains that the VP's biggest mistake was not taking ownership of the problem. Instead of focusing on what others were doing wrong, he needed to examine his own leadership and identify what he could do differently. Willink guided the VP to accept full responsibility for the failure and to focus on how he could lead his team to success. The VP's willingness to take ownership ultimately turned the situation around, demonstrating the power of this leadership principle in any organization. Willink concludes by emphasizing that extreme ownership isn't just a leadership technique, it's a mindset. It requires humility, courage, and a willingness to accept responsibility for everything that happens within your sphere of influence. He stresses that leaders must set the example, taking ownership of failures and empowering their teams to do the same. By embracing this principle, leaders can build high-performing teams that are capable of overcoming any challenge. He reiterates that the best leaders don't just take responsibility for their job, they take extreme ownership of everything that impacts their mission. Chapter 2: No Bad Teams, Only Bad Leaders. Jocko Willink recounts his experiences at Bud-S, the basic training for Navy SEALs, to illustrate how leadership is the key to success, not just physical strength. He describes Hell Week, a particularly brutal part of training, as a mental test rather than a physical one. Many strong athletes fail not because they aren't fit enough, but because they lack the determination, innovation, and teamwork needed to push through. Willink himself went through this grueling training and remembers how only a small fraction of the initial group made it to the end. He explains that the goal isn't just to create tough individuals, but to develop leaders who can think strategically and outsmart their opponents. Later, Willink returned to Bud-S as an instructor, overseeing the training and observing the students. He noticed a pattern. Boat crews, teams of 7, struggled not because of the weight of their inflatable boats, which were incredibly heavy, but because of leadership. The boats were a symbolic challenge, representing the burdens leaders must carry and the need for teamwork. He recalls one particular Hell Week, where Boat Crew 6 consistently performed the worst. They argued, blamed each other, and lacked a unified effort. The instructor staff noticed this and, in a bold move, swapped the leaders of Boat Crew 6 and Boat Crew 2, the top-performing crew. The results were immediate and striking. Boat Crew 6, under the new leadership, suddenly began to win races. The change wasn't about physical ability, it was about attitude and direction. The new leader instilled a belief in the team's ability to succeed and focused their efforts on working together. This demonstrated a core principle Willink emphasizes: there are no bad teams, only bad leaders. A strong leader can transform a struggling group into a high-performing one. Willink connects this to his own experiences, recalling how he learned to focus his boat crew on small, achievable goals during his own Hell Week, building momentum and ultimately leading them to success. Willink stresses that leadership isn't about being the strongest or most skilled individual, but about taking responsibility for the team's performance. He shares painful memories from his combat deployments in Iraq, where he lost friends and comrades. These experiences reinforced the weight of leadership and the consequences of decisions made in high-pressure situations. He explains that the loss of life wasn't just a statistic, but a personal burden he carried as a commander. He uses these stories to emphasize the importance of preparing future leaders for the immense responsibility they will face. He describes how he ran a junior officer training course designed to instill these leadership principles in young SEAL officers. A key part of this training was the Mark Lee and Mike Monsoor Memorial Run, a challenging uphill course culminating at a cemetery where these fallen SEALs were buried. Willink used this as a powerful reminder of the stakes involved and the importance of extreme ownership, taking complete responsibility for everything that happens within a team. He explains that a leader's attitude sets the tone for the entire team, and that a culture of accountability and continuous improvement is essential for success. Willink illustrates these concepts with a business example, detailing how he consulted with a financial services company struggling with a new product launch. The CEO recognized the need for better leadership, but was hesitant to address issues with his Chief Technology Officer, CTO, who was a brilliant but difficult individual. The CTO resisted the idea of extreme ownership, blaming external factors for the product's failure. Willink explains that tolerating poor leadership, even from a highly skilled individual, undermines the entire team. Ultimately, the CEO made the difficult decision to replace the CTO, and the company began to see positive results. This case study reinforces Willink's message. Effective leadership is the single greatest factor in a team's success, and leaders must be willing to hold themselves and their teams accountable for their performance. Chapter 3: Believe. Jocko Willink found himself puzzled by a mission order while stationed in Ramadi, Iraq. It directed his highly skilled SEAL team, Task Unit Bruiser, to work alongside the Iraqi army. This was a big change. Previously, the SEALs operated mostly with other elite American and Allied forces. Willink understood that SEALs were like a professional sports team, incredibly well-trained, knowing each other's moves without even speaking, and prepared for anything through years of intense practice. They were physically fit, pushing themselves constantly, and equipped with the best technology. But the Iraqi soldiers were different. Many were poorly trained, lacked motivation, and were often unreliable. Willink knew this mission presented a challenge. He recognized the Iraqi army had faced difficult circumstances, with families threatened by terrorists and a history of being disbanded and rebuilt. However, he also saw that most Iraqi soldiers weren't up to the standard needed to fight the growing insurgency. The SEALs' training and equipment were far superior. The order felt counterintuitive. Why intentionally add a disadvantage? Willink, as the commander, initially thought it was a bad idea. But he understood that a leader must believe in the mission, even when it doesn't make immediate sense. He began to question the why behind the order. Willink realized the goal wasn't simply to win battles in the traditional sense. It was about creating a stable and secure Iraq. He reasoned that if the Iraqi soldiers could be trained to handle security themselves, the U.S. military wouldn't be stuck there for generations. The SEALs could help by training the Iraqi soldiers, but more importantly, by actively fighting alongside them and weakening the insurgency. This would create an environment where the Iraqi soldiers had a chance to succeed. Willink understood that to get approval for missions, they would need to include Iraqi soldiers, even if it meant increased risk. He saw this as a necessary trade-off. Willink then addressed his team. He knew they would be frustrated with the idea of fighting alongside less capable soldiers. He didn't sugarcoat the situation, acknowledging the dangers and the potential for things to go wrong. However, he explained the bigger picture, the long-term goal of Iraqi self-sufficiency and avoiding a perpetual American presence. He emphasized that if the Iraqi soldiers couldn't handle security, the U.S. military would be stuck there indefinitely. He explained that while the Iraqi army might never reach the SEALs' level of skill, they could be good enough to maintain a basic level of peace. He made it clear that their missions would be approved only if Iraqi soldiers were included, framing it as a necessary step to achieve their objectives. Willink's approach highlights a key leadership principle. A leader must believe in the mission to inspire their team. He didn't pretend the situation was ideal, but he articulated a compelling reason for it. He understood that his team needed to understand the why behind the order to commit to it fully. He also emphasized the importance of decentralized command, explaining that while he was giving the overall direction, his team needed to understand the strategy so they could make effective decisions on the ground. Willink's example demonstrates that true leadership isn't about blindly following orders, but about understanding the bigger picture and inspiring others to work towards a common goal. The deployment proved challenging. Iraqi soldiers often made mistakes, sometimes dangerous ones, but they also offered valuable insights, like knowing how to quietly open doors and identifying enemy fighters based on local knowledge. Through shared experiences, a level of camaraderie developed between the SEALs and their Iraqi counterparts. The SEALs' presence and aggressive tactics helped weaken the insurgency, creating a more secure environment. By the end of the deployment, the Iraqi army was able to take on more responsibility for security, demonstrating the success of the strategy. Willink illustrates this principle with a business example. He recounts a situation where mid-level managers were upset about a new compensation plan. They didn't understand the reasoning behind it and couldn't effectively communicate it to their sales teams. Willink advised them to ask questions and understand the CEO's strategy. Once the CEO explained the plan, reducing costs to lower prices and focus on top performers, the managers understood and could then support it. This highlights that leaders at all levels need to understand the why behind decisions to effectively lead their teams. Willink stresses that it's the responsibility of both senior leaders to explain their decisions and junior leaders to seek clarification when needed. Ultimately, belief in the mission, driven by understanding, is essential for success, whether on a battlefield or in a boardroom. Chapter 4, Check the Ego. Jocko Willink recounts his experiences in Ramadi, Iraq, illustrating how Navy SEALs lead and win not just through skill, but through a specific mindset. The opening scene immediately showcases this. When the camp comes under attack, Willink doesn't wait for perfect conditions, body armor fully fastened, a detailed plan. He runs toward the danger, prioritizing immediate action and leading by example. He observes his team doing the same, even arriving in casual clothes but ready to fight. This demonstrates a core SEAL principle: decisive action and a willingness to engage regardless of personal comfort. It's about getting to the fight and taking control of the situation, not worrying about appearances. Willink emphasizes the brutal reality of Ramadi as the most dangerous place in Iraq. He doesn't sugarcoat the violence or the enemy's capabilities. This honest assessment is crucial. SEALs don't underestimate their opponents. They understand the stakes are incredibly high, and complacency can be deadly. The story of the machine gunner firing for the first time highlights a contrast. While there's a sense of excitement, Willink immediately frames it as a wake-up call. This isn't a game, it's a total war zone. This illustrates the SEAL approach of balancing confidence with a constant awareness of the danger. They are prepared to fight, but never arrogant enough to believe they are invincible. The narrative details the sophisticated and relentless attacks by Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Willink breaks down the enemy's tactics: coordinated machine gunfire, RPGs, mortars, and suicide bombers. He doesn't just describe the attacks. He explains why they are dangerous and how they aim to overwhelm U.S. forces. This detailed understanding of the enemy is a hallmark of SEAL leadership. They don't just react, they analyze, anticipate, and prepare. He also praises the courage of the Army and Marine soldiers holding the outposts, recognizing their bravery and dedication despite facing overwhelming odds. This demonstrates a key aspect of SEAL leadership: respect for fellow warriors, regardless of branch. Willink stresses the importance of continuous improvement and avoiding complacency. He pushed his team to constantly refine their performance, recognizing that the enemy would never stand still. This relentless pursuit of excellence is a defining characteristic of SEALs. He also acknowledges the initial confidence of Task Unit Bruiser, but quickly tempers it with a reminder that Ramadi is different. This illustrates the need for humility and adaptability. What worked in previous deployments might not work here. They must be willing to learn and adjust. The arrival of the new unit and the subsequent conflict highlights a critical leadership principle: ego. Willink observes that some members of the new unit displayed arrogance and a lack of respect for the established procedures and the soldiers who had been fighting there for months. They refused to share information, disregarded advice, and generally acted as if they were superior. This behavior, Willink argues, is detrimental to mission success. He directly intervenes when his platoon commander hesitates to help the new unit, recognizing that the enemy is the true opponent, not other coalition forces. Willink's advice to his platoon commander, to help the new unit regardless of their attitude, is a powerful example of extreme ownership. It's about focusing on the mission, not personal feelings or ego. He explains that a leader must take responsibility for everything that happens under their command, even the mistakes of others. The story of Gary, the corporate manager, further illustrates this point. Willink guides Gary to take ownership of the situation, even though the drilling superintendent made the initial error. By framing it as his own failure to communicate effectively, Gary can approach the superintendent without triggering a defensive reaction. This demonstrates that effective leadership isn't about blame. It's about finding solutions and improving performance. Ultimately, Willink's narrative demonstrates that SEAL leadership isn't about individual heroism or tactical brilliance alone. It's about a combination of decisive action, relentless preparation, humility, respect, and a commitment to extreme ownership. It's about putting the mission first, checking your ego at the door, and working together to achieve victory. It's a leadership philosophy built on the understanding that in a chaotic and dangerous environment, the only way to win is to take responsibility for everything and never stop striving to improve. Chapter 5, Cover and Move. Leif Babin's story from Ramadi, Iraq, perfectly shows how Jocko Willink and other Navy SEALs lead and win, not just in war, but in any challenging situation. The chapter centers around a dangerous mission to clear a section of the city, and it highlights a core SEAL principle: teamwork, or what Willink calls cover and move. The situation was tricky. Babin's team needed to set up sniper positions to protect Army soldiers during a search, but the initial location wasn't ideal. It lacked good cover and left them vulnerable. This is where strong leadership came into play. Babin didn't just order his team to make do. He listened to their concerns and explored options, even if none were great. Willink emphasizes that good leaders don't shy away from tough choices. Babin faced a dilemma: stay in a weak position, split his team, or pull back and risk a firefight. He chose the least bad option, pulling back, but it wasn't a decision made lightly. He understood the risks and communicated them to his team, earning their trust and buy-in. This is a key aspect of SEAL leadership: owning the decision, even when it's imperfect. The story then demonstrates the importance of clear communication. Babin immediately informed both his other sniper team and the Army unit they were supporting about their change of plans. This ensured everyone was on the same page and could adjust accordingly. Willink often talks about decentralized command, where leaders empower their teams to make decisions, but it's always within the context of a shared understanding of the overall mission. As the mission unfolded, Babin's team came under fire. This is where SEAL training and discipline truly shone. They responded with precise, coordinated fire, effectively suppressing the enemy. But the real lesson comes after the immediate threat was neutralized. Babin's team had successfully completed their part of the mission, but his platoon chief questioned why they hadn't stayed in position to cover the other sniper team's withdrawal. This wasn't a reprimand, but a teaching moment. Babin realized he'd been so focused on his own team's immediate situation that he'd forgotten to consider the bigger picture and how they could support each other. Willink often stresses the importance of extreme ownership, taking responsibility for everything that happens under your command. Babin's mistake wasn't a failure of execution, but a failure of perspective. He hadn't fully embraced the cover and move principle on a team-wide level. He'd applied it within his own unit, but hadn't extended it to the other SEAL sniper team. This illustrates a crucial point about SEAL leadership. It's not just about individual skill, but about fostering a culture of teamwork and mutual support. The story concludes with a business example, showing how the same principle applies outside of combat. A production manager was blaming a subsidiary company for delays, rather than looking for ways to collaborate and improve the overall process. Willink and Babin helped him see that both companies were part of the same organization, with a shared goal. By focusing on how they could help each other, the production manager was able to improve efficiency and reduce downtime. This demonstrates that the SEAL principles of teamwork, communication, and extreme ownership aren't just effective in war. They're universally applicable to any situation where people need to work together to achieve a common goal. Ultimately, the chapter shows that leading and winning, as a SEAL or in any other field, requires a commitment to the team, a willingness to take responsibility, and a relentless focus on the mission. Chapter 6, Simple. Jocko Willink recounts a harrowing experience at Combat Outpost Falcon in Ramadi, Iraq, illustrating how effective leadership hinges on simplicity amidst chaos. The story begins with a jarring mortar attack, a stark reminder of the danger inherent in operating deep within enemy territory. Willink, responsible for coordinating a team of SEALs with Army forces, quickly understood that success wasn't about elaborate plans, but about clear communication and decisive action. He and his team were the first U.S. forces on the ground, tasked with establishing a foothold in a hostile neighborhood. This initial push involved securing buildings, providing sniper cover, and coordinating with tanks and engineers, a complex operation from the start. The core of Willink's leadership philosophy shines through in a subsequent scenario involving a military transition team, MTT, eager to lead Iraqi soldiers on a patrol. The MTT leader, brimming with confidence from training exercises, proposed a lengthy and intricate route through Ramadi. Willink immediately recognized the plan's flaws. It was overly ambitious, traversing multiple areas controlled by different units, riddled with potential IEDs, and lacking a clear path for support if things went south. This is where Willink's experience as a SEAL leader came into play. He didn't dismiss the MTT leader's enthusiasm, but he calmly and respectfully pointed out the inherent risks and the need for a more streamlined approach. He understood that in a high-stakes environment, complexity is the enemy. Willink advocated for a simpler patrol route, confined to the area controlled by a single Army company. This wasn't about undermining the MTT leader's initiative, but about prioritizing safety and ensuring a manageable operation. He knew that a smaller, more focused mission would allow for better coordination, quicker response times, and a higher chance of success. Even after the plan was simplified, Willink took the time to meticulously review the route with the SEAL element accompanying the patrol, identifying landmarks and assigning building numbers for clear communication. He understood the importance of shared situational awareness, ensuring everyone understood their roles and the potential dangers. The patrol inevitably encountered enemy fire, a testament to the volatile environment. Willink's emphasis on clear communication proved vital as he coordinated fire support and medical evacuation for the wounded Iraqi soldiers. He remained calm and focused, relaying critical information to the company commander and ensuring a swift response. The successful extraction of the casualties and the subsequent return to Cop Falcon underscored the effectiveness of Willink's leadership. He didn't micromanage, but he provided the necessary guidance and support, allowing the team to execute the mission effectively. The story culminates in a powerful lesson about the importance of simplicity. Willink observed that the MTT leader, initially confident in his complex plan, gained a newfound appreciation for the value of a streamlined approach after experiencing combat firsthand. This experience reinforced Willink's belief that in any challenging situation, whether on the battlefield or in the business world, keeping things simple is paramount. He illustrates this point with a story about a manufacturing plant where a complicated bonus system failed to motivate employees. By simplifying the bonus structure to focus on just 2 key metrics units, produced and quality, the company saw a significant increase in productivity. Willink's message is clear. Effective leadership isn't about creating elaborate strategies. It's about fostering clear understanding, decisive action, and a relentless focus on the essential elements of success. He emphasizes that a leader's job is not just to have a good plan, but to ensure that everyone on the team understands it, so they can adapt and overcome challenges when things inevitably go wrong. Chapter 7, Prioritize and Execute. Jocko Willink recounts a story about a pharmaceutical company struggling with declining profits. The CEO, eager to fix things, had created a long list of new projects, new products, new distribution centers, a new website, and more. It was a lot, and Willink recognized a dangerous situation. The company was decisively engaged in too many battles at once. This military term describes being so committed to a fight that retreat isn't an option. And Willink explained that the CEO's many initiatives had created a similar state of being overwhelmed. He pointed out that spreading resources too thin meant the company wasn't truly focused on what mattered most. Willink asked the CEO to identify the single most important priority. The answer came quickly: improving the performance of the sales force. The CEO understood that if salespeople weren't actively selling, the company wouldn't survive. However, with so many other projects demanding attention, that crucial priority wasn't getting the focus it deserved. Willink explained that in a chaotic situation, like a battle or a struggling business, leaders must prioritize and execute. This means identifying the most important task and dedicating all available resources to it, one step at a time. Trying to do everything at once leads to failure. The author used the analogy of a SEAL team in combat. If a team tries to handle too many threats simultaneously, they'll likely fail to address any of them effectively. The same principle applies in business. Willink emphasized that a leader must step back from the immediate chaos, assess the situation, and make a clear decision about the highest priority. Then, the team must focus all its energy on executing that priority. He explained that this isn't about ignoring other important tasks, but about tackling them one at a time in the right order. The CEO took Willink's advice and shifted the company's entire focus to supporting the sales force. Every department, marketing, labs, even management, contributed to helping the salespeople succeed. They created new marketing materials, organized customer tour, and implemented a system to track sales activity. This unified effort quickly produced results. The company's sales began to improve, and momentum built. Willink's point was clear. By prioritizing and executing, the CEO had turned a struggling company around. Willink's experience highlights a key leadership principle: staying ahead of problems through contingency planning. Anticipating potential challenges and developing responses beforehand allows a team to react quickly and decisively when those challenges arise. This prevents leaders from being overwhelmed and enables more effective decision-making. He also stressed the importance of clear communication. When priorities shift, everyone on the team needs to know so they can adjust their efforts accordingly. Avoiding target fixation. Becoming so focused on one issue that you miss other important developments is also crucial. Successful teams must remain adaptable and willing to reprioritize as needed. Ultimately, Willink's story demonstrates that effective leadership isn't about doing everything at once, but about doing the right thing at the right time. Chapter 8: Decentralized Command. Jocko Willink recounts a tense situation in Ramadi, Iraq, where his SEAL team, Task Unit Bruiser, faced enemy snipers. This event highlights a core principle of how Navy SEALs lead and win: decentralized command. Willink explains that in the chaos of battle, a single commander can't control every detail. Trying to do so would be impossible and would prevent him from focusing on the bigger picture. Instead, SEAL leaders are carefully trained and trusted to make decisions on the ground, even life-or-death ones. Willink emphasizes that this trust isn't given freely. It's earned through rigorous training, where leaders are pushed to their limits and learn from their mistakes. He describes the challenging military operations in urban terrain, training at Fort Knox, where instructors deliberately created confusing and stressful scenarios. This wasn't about making the training realistic. It was about preparing SEALs for an enemy that wouldn't follow the rules. The goal was to force leaders to rely on their judgment and the skills of their subordinate teams. Willink notes that initially, his leaders tried to control everything, but they quickly realized that no one person could manage so many moving parts effectively. The key, Willink explains, is breaking down the team into smaller, manageable units of 4 to 6 operators, each with a clear leader. These smaller teams operate with a shared understanding of the overall mission, what Willink calls commander's intent. This means everyone knows the ultimate goal: even if they're making independent decisions on how to achieve it. He illustrates this with the example of Delta Platoon needing to move to a different sniper position. They didn't ask for permission. They informed him of their decision, demonstrating their understanding of the mission and their confidence in their judgment. Willink stresses the importance of clear communication and trust flowing both ways. Subordinate leaders need to understand their boundaries, what decisions they can make independently, and when they need to consult with higher-ups. Senior leaders, in turn, must empower their teams and support their decisions, even if they don't always agree. He recounts a near disaster where a Bradley fighting vehicle was about to engage a building mistakenly identified as an enemy position, only to discover it was occupied by SEAL snipers. This close call underscored the need for careful verification and the importance of trusting the judgment of those on the ground. The author illustrates this principle with a business example, describing a regional president of an investment firm whose organizational chart was disorganized and lacked clear leadership lines. Willink pointed out that the president was trying to manage too many people directly, hindering the effectiveness of his team. He explained that, just like in the SEAL teams, smaller, well-defined teams with empowered leaders are essential for success. The president needed to trust his subordinate leaders and give them the authority to make decisions, fostering a more agile and responsive organization. Ultimately, Willink argues that decentralized command isn't just a military tactic. It's a leadership philosophy applicable to any team or organization. It requires strong leaders who are willing to relinquish control, trust their people, and empower them to take ownership of their responsibilities. This approach, he believes, is critical for navigating complex and dynamic environments and achieving victory, whether on the battlefield or in the business world. Chapter 9, Plan. Jocko Willink recounts a hostage rescue mission in Ramadi, Iraq, illustrating how SEALs lead and win through meticulous planning, clear communication, and decisive action. The situation was incredibly dangerous. A young Iraqi teenager had been kidnapped by al-Qaeda-linked terrorists who demanded a hefty ransom and threatened beheading. Time was critical, and Task Unit Bruiser needed a plan fast. Willink emphasizes that even with the high stakes, a calm, methodical approach was essential. The planning process began with gathering intelligence. A young, relatively inexperienced intelligence officer, nicknamed Butters, diligently collected information, despite the risks. Willink highlights the importance of utilizing all available resources, even those who might not have extensive experience, recognizing their potential contributions. Simultaneously, the SEALs began formulating a plan, considering the heavily IED-laden roads and the enemy-controlled neighborhood surrounding the hostage's location. The goal wasn't just to rescue the hostage, but to do so while minimizing risk to their assault force, SEALs, EOD technicians, and Iraqi soldiers. Willink, as the ground force commander, and Leif Babin, the assault force commander, worked together to analyze the mission and available assets, including armored vehicles and Navy helicopters. They developed a plan involving snipers providing overwatch, a swift assault on the house, and a coordinated extraction. Crucially, they sought input from a U.S. Army company commander familiar with the area, demonstrating a willingness to learn from others' expertise. This illustrates a key leadership principle: humility and recognizing that valuable knowledge can come from unexpected sources. Before executing the plan, a detailed briefing was held. Willink stresses the importance of clear communication, simplifying complex rules of engagement into a concise statement. If you have to pull the trigger, make sure the people you kill are bad. This direct, unambiguous instruction eliminated any doubt and empowered the SEALs to make quick, decisive decisions in a chaotic environment. Babin reinforced 3 key priorities: maintain surprise, move quickly once inside the house, and positively identify threats while protecting the hostage. Just before launch, new intelligence revealed the presence of IEDs and machine gun positions. Instead of panicking or scrapping the plan, Willink calmly acknowledged the increased risk and expressed confidence in their preparation. This exemplifies a crucial leadership trait, remaining composed under pressure and trusting in the team's training and planning. He famously responded with "good times," a phrase embodying the SEALs' acceptance of challenges and their determination to overcome them. The mission was executed flawlessly. The SEALs maintained surprise, quickly cleared the house, and rescued the hostage unharmed. A humorous moment involving a SEAL impersonating a character from a movie lightened the mood and demonstrated the importance of maintaining morale even in tense situations. The success was attributed to meticulous planning, clear communication, and the team's ability to adapt to changing circumstances. Willink uses this mission as a case study in a leadership exercise, posing the question of what to do when faced with new, dangerous intelligence. He points out that assuming a target is not booby-trapped is a failure of leadership. Effective planning involves anticipating potential threats and developing contingency plans to mitigate them. He emphasizes that while risk can't always be eliminated, it can be carefully calculated and managed. The chapter concludes with a distillation of key leadership principles. Willink stresses the importance of a clear mission, decentralized planning, empowering subordinates, maintaining situational awareness, and constantly analyzing performance to improve future operations. He advocates for a standardized planning process that can be applied across any team or organization, emphasizing that the ultimate goal is to empower the team to understand the mission, execute effectively, and win. He illustrates this with an example of how he helped a business team develop a similar planning process, leading to improved decision-making and successful outcomes. Chapter 10, Leading Up and Down the Chain of Command. The night in Ramadi was a stark reminder of the constant danger faced by American forces. Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, both Navy SEALs, watched as distant fighting erupted, a display of tracer fire and explosions lighting up the sky. This wasn't unusual, but it underscored the reality of their mission. They were nearing the end of a 6-month deployment, a time marked by intense combat and heartbreaking loss. Task Unit Bruiser, the SEAL team they led, had been instrumental in helping the U.S. Army regain control of Ramadi from insurgents, a crucial step in what would become known as the Anbar Awakening. But success came at a steep price. The loss of Mark Lee, the first SEAL killed in Iraq, and the devastating injuries to Ryan Job, who lost his sight, weighed heavily on the team. The recent sacrifice of Mike Mansour, who dove on a grenade to save his teammates, was another blow. These weren't just casualties, they were friends, brothers, and the emotional toll was immense. Despite the victories, Babin wrestled with the question of whether their efforts truly made a lasting difference. This internal struggle highlighted a core principle of leadership: acknowledging the human cost of conflict and carrying the burden of responsibility for those under your command. It wasn't enough to win battles. Leaders had to grapple with the profound impact of war on individuals and families. Returning to the United States was a jarring transition. The peace of San Diego felt surreal after the chaos of Ramadi. Babin found himself torn, grappling with the grief and the feeling that the sacrifices made were often misunderstood. He was angered by casual comments about blood and treasure spent in Iraq, recognizing that these were real lives lost and families forever changed. He also faced criticism from within the SEAL community, from those who hadn't experienced the intensity of the fighting and questioned their tactics. This experience taught Babin a valuable lesson about leading up the chain of command. It wasn't enough to simply do the job. Leaders had to advocate for their team, explain their actions, and defend their accomplishments. Jocko Willink understood this dynamic well. He was tasked with presenting their Ramadi experience to the Chief of Naval Operations, the highest-ranking officer in the Navy. Willink created a visual representation of their progress, a map showing how Task Unit Bruiser had systematically taken control of areas previously held by the enemy. This slide, depicting the transformation of Ramadi, was a revelation for Babin. He realized that while immersed in the details of individual missions, he hadn't fully grasped the strategic impact of their collective efforts. This underscored a critical leadership principle: the importance of seeing the bigger picture and understanding how individual actions contribute to overall success. It wasn't enough to be a skilled tactician. Leaders had to be strategic thinkers. This realization led to a deeper understanding of leading down the chain of command. Babin recognized that he had failed to adequately communicate the strategic context to his SEALs. The frontline troops, focused on their immediate tasks, needed to understand how their efforts fit into the larger mission. Willink agreed, acknowledging that even with the best intentions, leaders sometimes underestimate the need to explain the why behind the what. He realized that ownership and commitment increased when team members understood the purpose of their actions. The SEALs who felt most involved in the planning process were also the ones who remained positive and focused throughout the deployment. This highlighted the power of empowering team members and giving them a sense of ownership. Willink and Babin learned that effective leadership wasn't just about giving orders. It was about fostering understanding and building trust. It meant routinely communicating with the team, explaining the strategic goals, and ensuring everyone understood their role in achieving them. It also meant actively seeking feedback and addressing concerns. This approach wasn't always easy, especially when dealing with criticism from higher up the chain of command. But Willink emphasized the importance of pushing information up, of educating superiors about the realities on the ground, and of advocating for the resources and support needed to succeed. Leading up the chain wasn't about challenging authority. It was about providing the necessary context for informed decision-making. The experience in Ramadi taught Jocko Willink and Leif Babin that true leadership wasn't about rank or position. It was about taking ownership, fostering understanding, and empowering others. It was about leading both down and up the chain of command, ensuring that everyone was aligned and working towards a common goal. It was a lesson forged in the crucible of combat, a lesson that would serve them well in all aspects of their lives. Chapter 11, Decisiveness Amid Uncertainty. The story begins with Leif Babin, a Navy SEAL officer, facing a tough situation in Ramadi, Iraq. He and his team were supporting Army soldiers, and a potential enemy sniper had been spotted. Babin's lead sniper, Chris Kyle, reported seeing someone with a scoped weapon, but couldn't get a clear look. This situation perfectly illustrates a core principle of how Navy SEALs lead and win: decisive action amidst uncertainty. Jocko Willink, Babin's commanding officer, emphasizes that in combat, you rarely have all the facts. You must make the best decision possible with the information you have, and be prepared to adjust as things change. The Army company commander wanted Kyle to shoot immediately, believing the potential threat to his soldiers was too great to ignore. However, Babin hesitated. He recognized the risk of shooting the wrong person, a friendly soldier, was far too high. This demonstrates another key SEAL leadership principle: extreme ownership. Babin took full responsibility for the decision, understanding that the consequences, good or bad, would fall on him. He didn't blindly follow orders or succumb to pressure. He carefully weighed the risks and benefits, prioritizing the safety of everyone involved. Willink often talks about how SEALs are taught to own every aspect of a mission, from planning to execution, and to accept full accountability for the outcome. Babin repeatedly refused to authorize the shot, despite the commander's insistence. He understood that a hasty decision could be catastrophic. He remembered a basic safety rule from his childhood: know your target and what's beyond it. This seemingly simple rule highlights the importance of discipline and attention to detail, qualities ingrained in SEAL training. Willink stresses that SEALs are trained to maintain composure under immense pressure, to focus on the fundamentals, and to avoid emotional reactions. Ultimately, Babin ordered the Army to clear the building. It turned out the enemy sniper was actually a U.S. soldier with a scope on his rifle. This near disaster underscored the importance of Babin's initial hesitation and his commitment to positive identification. Willink often shares stories of close calls in combat, emphasizing that even small mistakes can have devastating consequences. He teaches that leaders must be willing to challenge assumptions, question orders, and prioritize accuracy over speed. The story then shifts to a business scenario, where Jocko Willink and Babin were consulting for a software company. The company faced a conflict between two senior engineers who were undermining each other and threatening to take their teams with them if they weren't satisfied. The CEO was paralyzed by indecision, unsure which engineer to believe or how to resolve the situation. This mirrors the combat scenario, highlighting the universal applicability of SEAL leadership principles. Willink guided the CEO to recognize that she had enough information to make a decision. He pointed out that both engineers were causing disruption and that neither was an exceptional leader. He advocated for a bold move, firing both of them. This demonstrates the SEAL principle of decisive action. Willink explains that in combat, waiting for perfect information is a recipe for disaster. Similarly, in business, leaders must be willing to make tough choices, even when the outcome is uncertain. He emphasizes that inaction can be more damaging than a wrong decision. The CEO initially resisted, fearing the loss of talent and expertise. However, Willink convinced her that the negative impact of the engineer's behavior outweighed the potential loss. He highlighted the opportunity to promote from within, empowering frontline employees and fostering loyalty. This illustrates the SEAL emphasis on teamwork and empowering subordinates. Willink often talks about the importance of building strong teams, delegating responsibility, and trusting your people to execute. Ultimately, the CEO fired both engineers and promoted two capable individuals from their teams. The situation was resolved quickly and effectively, demonstrating the power of decisive leadership. Willink's approach wasn't about finding the right answer, but about making a calculated decision based on the available information and taking ownership of the outcome. He consistently teaches that leadership isn't about being liked or avoiding conflict. It's about making the tough calls necessary to achieve the mission. The story shows that the principles of leading and winning, honed in the intense environment of combat, are directly applicable to the challenges faced in the business world and in everyday life. Chapter 12, Discipline Equals Freedom, the Dichotomy of Leadership. Jocko Willink recounts his experiences as a SEAL platoon commander in Iraq, illustrating how discipline and effective leadership are crucial for success, even in the most challenging environments. Early in his deployment, Willink's team, highly trained in combat, struggled with a seemingly simple task: properly searching buildings for evidence. They were quick to tear things apart, looking for hidden items, but created such chaos that important clues were often missed or overlooked, and the time spent searching put them at risk. This initial approach, while energetic, lacked the necessary discipline and systematic process. The situation changed when new rules were put in place by the Iraqi court system, demanding careful documentation and a clear chain of custody for any evidence collected. This forced Willink to address the team's undisciplined methods. He tasked his assistant platoon commander with developing a more efficient search procedure. The resulting plan, though initially appearing complex, broke down into simple, assigned tasks for each team member, sketching the layout, labeling rooms, photographing evidence, and designating a room owner responsible for everything within that space. This systematic approach ensured thoroughness and accountability, drastically reducing search times and minimizing the risk of missing crucial evidence. However, implementing this new plan wasn't easy. The SEALs, accustomed to a more aggressive approach, resisted the change. They worried it would take too long and put them in danger. Willink understood this resistance and addressed it directly, pointing out the team's past mistakes, missed evidence, unsearched rooms, and emphasizing the need for improvement. He explained that discipline wasn't about slowing them down, but about making them more effective and reducing risk. He encouraged a trial run, and the results spoke for themselves. The new method was faster, more thorough, and ultimately safer. This experience highlights a core principle Willink emphasizes: discipline equals freedom. By adhering to a structured process, the team gained the ability to operate more efficiently, hit multiple targets in a single night, and maintain a clear chain of custody for evidence. This disciplined approach wasn't just about following rules, it was about empowering the team to achieve more. Willink extends this concept beyond tactical operations, explaining that discipline begins with simple daily choices, like waking up on time. He shares how the most successful SEALs were those who consistently demonstrated self-discipline in all aspects of their lives, waking up early to prepare, studying tactics, and maintaining their gear. Willink then delves into the complexities of leadership, illustrating that effective leaders must navigate a series of seemingly contradictory qualities. He uses the analogy of a tightrope walker, constantly balancing opposing forces. A leader must be confident but not arrogant, aggressive but not overbearing, calm but not robotic. He stresses that recognizing these dichotomies is a powerful tool for leaders, allowing them to find equilibrium and make sound decisions. He illustrates this with a business example, recounting a situation where a company CEO, a friend of his, was reluctant to shut down a failing division led by another longtime friend, despite clear evidence it was losing money. The CEO's loyalty, while admirable, was clouding his judgment and jeopardizing the company's financial stability. Willink helped the CEO realize he was prioritizing personal relationships over the overall mission, and encouraged him to make the difficult but necessary decision to close the division. This example underscores the importance of extreme ownership, taking responsibility for all outcomes, while also exercising decentralized command, empowering team members to take ownership of their tasks. Ultimately, Willink argues that a leader must be willing to make tough choices, even when they are personally difficult, to ensure the success of the team and the accomplishment of the mission. He concludes that a good leader has nothing to prove, but always has everything to prove, constantly earning the trust and respect of their team through consistent action and sound judgment. And that brings us to the end of our summary of this book. I hope you found it insightful and valuable. If you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe for more. Your support helps us bring you more great content. Thanks for watching.